Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. Before I talk about today's video, I want to let you know that next week's video will be the monthly Q&A. So please post your questions in the comment section or email me if you would rather remain anonymous. So today, I will start a new series. The name of this new series is Learning and Evolving from Past Practitioners. This series will focus on some of my teachers as well as other masters of prior generations who are not my Kung Fu ancestors. The objective of this series is to introduce their experience, my understanding of their teaching, and what I have done based on their teaching. Of course, some of them were not my teachers, but I would still like to introduce their practice if their teachings have had a major impact on the development of the style. Initially, I was in two minds about creating this video series because it's hard for me to talk about them without getting emotional. And of course, with emotion comes strong opinions and bias. But I believe that this series will provide useful information on the history and evolution of a style if you are curious to know about it. More importantly, I will also talk about the influence their teaching had on me along with my agreements and disagreements with their teachings as well as how my own practice has evolved based on theirs. Traditionally, it is considered taboo to publicly discuss disagreement with the teachings of past practitioners. So, very often, such information is not openly discussed and only shared among close friends in community. So, why am I sharing this with you today? My main motivation behind this is to cultivate rationality and openness in the internal style community by openly reviewing and discussing past teachings. Of course, beginners may have no choice but to copy their teachers. But I believe it is every advanced practitioner's duty to evolve and enhance prior teachings and not limit themselves by treating past teachings as gospel. Unconditional worship of teachers and unconditional conformity to teaching is, in my opinion, very unhealthy behavior and often leads to creation of a cult. Anyway, let's get back to the topic. For each name in this series, I will introduce them based on the following structure: personal background if available, training background, teaching experience, and life story if possible. Finally, I will also demonstrate some movements relevant to their teaching. So today, I'd like to introduce my grandfather, Qinglin, who was also my first teacher. Since we lived together right from the time I was born until he passed away, I have a lot of first-hand information about him and would like to share it with you. That may not be the case for future videos in this series on other teachers and seniors. So I may have to focus on their training experience instead. Before I go any further, I would like to make something clear. Throughout most of this video, I will be referring to my grandfather by his full name. I'm aware that Chinese people and others with similar cultural backgrounds will find it blasphemous. But in this video, I'm speaking from the position of an observer of a practitioner and not as a devoted grandson or students. Also, if you have found any value in my content so far, you have to also acknowledge that my grandfather was an important link between past practitioners such as Zhang Zhaodong, Li Cunyi, and the modern era. And he was the guiding force behind my own martial practice. So, I believe he should be recognized by his own name rather than just as my grandfather. So, without any further ado, let's get started. First, Yang Qinglin's family history. Yang Qinglin was born in the summer of 1894. That would make him 127 years old if he were alive today. Unfortunately, he passed away in the summer of 1992, sometime after his 98th birthday. He was used to tell me to remember where our family came from. He told me that his father, my great-grandfather, was from Zhaoqiang County in Hebei Province. For a very short time, his father moved to Shandong Province for business. Then his father settled in Tianjin, and then he was born in Tianjin. I suspect his father practiced the martial art as well, but I cannot say for sure. Based on information passed down to me verbally, every generation had to have a family member focused on martial art training and carry the tradition forward. That's the reason behind my suspicion. Yang Qinglin's father owned a qianzhuang, or Chinese native bank. Chinese qianzhuang played an important role in the early economic development of China, even though the structure and function of the native bank was far less developed compared to the modern banking system. He told me many stories about how great his father was. For example, at things like identifying real silver yuanbao or Chinese sisi from fake. He was very proud of his father and would get excited every time he would talk about him. You can just imagine how much of the strong positive impact his father had on him if he would get excited while talking about his father even after his 70s. An old man became excited when talking about his father, which means that his father must have a strong positive impact on him. Yang Qinglin had an older brother and an older sister. His older brother was much older than him. As the first son of the rich family, he was sent to one of the best high schools in Tianjin back then. That school was opened by French people in Tianjin. The original name was College St. Louis, later changed to École Municipale Française. However, his older brother was not made to be a good student. He told me very often after the family servant sent his older brother to the school, instead of actually attending, he would skip a class and do something else. Gradually, his brother got addicted to opium and eventually died after a few years of financial struggle, since his father stopped sponsoring his brother financially, feeling a sense of family shame caused by the eldest son. Back then in China, the arranged marriage system was very prevalent and people got married early on in their lives. Yang Qinglin's older brother had a son before he died. As a result, he had to adopt his older brother's son, which was a very common practice in Tianjin back then. By the way, Yang Qinglin's adopted son, Yang Fengwu, was also my first Chen-style taichi teacher. I will talk about him in a future video. Anyway, let's get back to talking about Yang Qinglin. Since Yang Qinglin's elder brother died earlier because of poor life choices, his father decided to send him to Zhang Zhaodong, one of the most popular martial art teachers in Tianjin back then, as well as the founder of Xingyi-Bagua Palm. Li Cunyi, an older Kung Fu brother of Zhang Zhaodong, as well as one of the most renowned Xingyi masters, had his Biaoju, or bodyguard company that would accompany traders and protect merchandise. Even though Li Cunyi quit direct involvement in the bodyguard business and focused more on teaching martial arts in Tianjin when he was older, his students continued to operate it. My grandfather worked in Li Cunyi's bodyguard company in order to make a living and practice martial arts while traveling with other bodyguards, who were martial art practitioners themselves. By the way, the salary of a Biaoju was very high back then because people would pay a premium to protect their merchandise in transit. You can imagine the cost of protecting merchandise like large quantities of silver, especially since silver was a currency back then. However, Yang Qinglin's bodyguard career did not last very long once firearms came to be widely used. He often told me bandits would use machine guns to shoot at them while they could only respond with spears and swords. Thus, the deck was heavily stacked against them. To ensure the survival of their business, the bodyguard company quickly adopted a new model. They began transferring merchandise by train and equipped themselves with the firearms. Eventually, Li Cunyi's students shut down the company, after which Yang Qinglin started working for British American Tobacco Company, or BAT, until he retired. This company was ejected from China in 1949 when the Communist Party came to power. All of their properties in Tianjin was seized by the government and converted to a nationalized import-export company from which Yang Xinglin retired later with a good pension and a healthcare package. That was why he was able to enjoy his later years as well as teach martial arts for fun. Second, Yang Qinglin's training background. Yang Qinglin studied Xing-Yi and Xingyi-Bagua Palm with Zhang Zhaodong for about 2 decades. At the same time, he received a lot of training from Li Cunyi as well. I have already introduced Zhang Zhaodong and his Xingyi-Bagua Palm style in a prior video. If you have not watched it yet, please have a look. Link is in the description. Zhang Zhaodong had 2 approaches in terms of his practice and teaching. In his earlier stage of practice, he emphasized hard training in terms of 4th generation due to his Shaolin background. Then, after he reached about 50 years old of age, Zhang Zhaodong, his teaching approach and emphasized the soft 4th training method, which made his style more internal than before. It was a natural evolution of his practice, and my grandfather experienced the whole process, which he told me many times. This is coherent with the training approach that I outlined in last week's video. Link is in the description. Yang Qinglin also practiced Li Cunyi's Xing-Bagua or dragon-style Bagua as well. However, he told me he preferred Zhang Zhaodong's Xingyi-Bagua Palm to Li Cunyi's Bagua, since Xingyi-Bagua Palm is more circular and a true integration of Xingyi power and Bagua movement, which make Zhang Zhaodong's style not only unique but also practical in martial application. I learned both of these styles from him and I fully agree with his claim. But his favorite style was Zhang Zhaodong's late-stage Xing-Yi, which was a more softer flavor of his early-stage Xing-Yi. Yang Qinglin's job as a caravan bodyguard facilitated his travel to many regions of China. As a result, he learned different practice from different people, not only martial art but also Qigong and meditation. He also studied TCM from some of his Kung Fu brothers. Some of Zhang Zhaodong's students were famous TCM doctors in Tianjin, and he had the opportunity to study from them. So after he started training his grandson, he really applied his own method by using the same approach to guide my practice based on a systematic way. To summarize, Yang Qinglin was trained in martial art primarily by Zhang Zhaodong, and he also received significant teaching from Li Cunyi and others. Third, Yang Qinglin's teaching experience. After Zhang Zhaodong passed away, Yang Qinglin started teaching martial arts, but not as his primary source of income, since he already had a well-paid job. Even after 1949, when the Communist Party seized power, he only taught some friends of his family, neighbors, and some old students. Later on, even after modern wushu rose to popularity in China, he could still teach a small group of students for fun. Then, in his later 70s, he mainly focused on teaching his grandson, aka yours truly, on a daily basis. Like I mentioned before, since we lived together, I had to practice every day under his guidance. In day-to-day life, he was always very nice and kind to me, but when it came to martial art practice, he was very serious. I can certainly say that the relationship between him and myself, the grandson, was stronger than between him and his own children. When he was very old and lost a fair amount of his mobility, I was his primary caregiver. That was why I did not have a lot of opportunities to make friends or travel to different places before his passing away. But that's life. You win some, you lose some. Anyway, let's move on. Now, I'd like to talk about some specific technical topics related to Yang Qinglin's teaching. First of all, you should keep in mind that compared to many other people, including myself, Yang Qinglin was part of the older, more orthodox generation in terms of mentality, attitude, and perception of martial art practice. To him, martial art was not merely a way of life, but at a more primal level. It was the differences between life and death on a regular basis, both in terms of physical protection as well as making ends meet. He had experienced the social change during the Qing Dynasty, Nationalist Party, Communist Party, Cultural Revolution, and the socio-economic reforms that resulted with them. However, no matter what happened externally, he would always treat martial art practice as a part of his life, or rather, the most important part of his life. Even though the motivation behind the practice had changed from a survival skill to a way of maintaining health during his later years, and teaching me for fun, he never thought about changing or improving any of the styles that he practiced and taught. You can say he was very traditional, but in my opinion, he was more conventional than traditional, since traditional approach should involve some evolution or adaptation of prior practice, something which he did not work on at all. Of course, we have to acknowledge that he performed a great job of transferring prior practice from his teachers to myself and his other students, and he deserved credit for it. In his opinion, his teachers, especially Zhang Zhaodong's teaching, was the golden rule that was to be neither bent nor broken. Looking back, I consider this to be a limitation to his understanding. Second, in practice, he really emphasized hard practice to develop real martial capacity. Looking back, it's easy to see why that was the case. Back then, most people practiced martial art for use in battle or violent conflicts. Of course, intense hard training can help someone perform better in combat. However, I firmly believe that such hard training caused them to miss a lot of other elements such as cultural aspect and the pursuit of self-cultivation. I have given this phenomenon a lot of thought over the years and have come to the conclusion that survival was part of the culture back then, and the martial artists did not have the luxury to think about aspects beyond survival. If you were to consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs, most martial artists were concerned with the lower levels and couldn't reach the higher levels. Nowadays, it would be almost impossible to practice with the same attitude since we don't use martial arts for the same purpose anymore, unless, of course, you are a professional fighter in any capacity. So, I prefer a more holistic way of practice instead of treating it as the mere survival skill which was necessary back then. Back when I was learning from him, I practiced very hard under his guidance. But when it comes to teaching my own students, I prefer a softer but smarter approach with respect to aspects like self-cultivation, maintenance of health, as well as efforts during later stage in life. Through survival and self-defense skills are of course important, I believe. In modern times, the intangible supplementary benefits of martial arts like health, discipline, self-control, and mental alertness should be promoted more than survival skills. Third, now I would like to specifically point out of a major mistake in Yang Qinglin's practice. Well, to be clear, this aspect was a necessary evil back then, but it would be a mistake in modern times. Like I mentioned before, since that generation focused on hard training, it was very common for practitioners back then to suffer from physical damage in one form or another. For example, Yang Qinglin developed a physical condition in his 80s, wherein his right hand would shake slightly when unsupported. He practiced iron palm technique with his right hand. Of course, he used a different type of TCM ointment to prevent potential injury, but unfortunately, certain symptoms still manifested when he reached his 80s. My understanding is that training was a survival skill back then, but not anymore to most practitioners. He realized and acknowledged it as well eventually. So, the lesson I learned from his experience with hard training as well as those of others is that it is not necessary for someone to practice such intense hard training. This is why I always remind my students not to practice extreme exercise in order to convert the body into a machine. Your body will not become a machine no matter how hard you practice. You may become desensitized to the pain as you practice hard training, but you will most likely suffer from serious conditions in your later years as a result. One thing I'd like to point out is that, all things considered, he enjoyed a healthy life right up to his very last days, at 98 years of age. Back then, medical care in China was very minimal, and his longevity was a result of many factors, including practice, energy cultivation, and personality. I remember very well that he told me to be extra careful in practice with increasing age, especially after 60 years of age. He also emphasized that older people should never attack with a lot of power, or else the energy would bounce back to them, causing internal injuries. Instead, he said, older people should practice and cultivate soft force and block the bouncing force by tensing the shoulders. I tried this practice firsthand, and indeed, it totally changed the quality of power released. So, adjusting your practice to suit your age and physical condition is the key to not only maintaining skill but to preventing injury as well. This is only an example of teaching. It is very subtle and useful. By the way, if you are younger, let's say under 30, I would recommend you focus on hard force training and not worry about soft force at this stage. Please do not worry about the above mentioned condition of hard force training in your younger days. You should feel free to use as much power as you want. Your body will be able to repair itself. For example, while I was a kid, my grandfather asked me to practice hard force training every day. Of course, I felt very tired after training, but after a good night's sleep, all of the tiredness would disappear the next day. This is my personal experience, and I did it under my grandfather's guidance without any injury. 4. Yang Qinglin's life lessons. Well, it's a very hard topic to talk about here. I would like to say that people in his generation had experienced many tragic events. China was very weak back then, and people suffered a lot due to the overall social and economic condition. However, as far as I can remember, he was always very positive and optimistic in life. He always talked about 武德, or martial virtue, and always reminded me to respect martial virtue. Even though he never explained what exactly 武德 was, he always exemplified it in his daily life and would constantly remind me what to do and what to avoid in the martial art community. Even today, I continue to conduct myself according to his teaching of 武德. He said it is the natural way of nourishing your mind in order to discipline yourself in daily life. I would even go so far as to say that the word 武德 summarized Yang Qinglin's entire life. Demonstration. I'd like to demonstrate one exercise taught by him and my own variation developed based on his teaching. Okay, let me demonstrate an exercise taught by my grandfather. It's the way to develop the hard force. So open the feet like this posture. Hand move toward each other. Then just make this kind of movement. Okay? Then when you're ready, put the force. I found out this is good, this is great, but after years of practice, I realized there's a better way to practice the same movement by adding some more circular movement and the whole body coordinated movements. It becomes like this now. So slowly, okay? Then this is the way how I practice and teach to others. So you can see the subtle difference between these two movements. The takeaways. First, Yang Qinglin practiced Xing-Yi and Xingyi-Bagua Palm under Zhang Zhaodong and Long Xing-Bagua under Li Cunyi, but he especially preferred the late stage of Zhang Zhaodong's Xing-Yi. Second, he focused on the old way of hard training, but adjusted his practice when he got older. Third, he lived by the principle of Wude and always emphasized its importance. Fourth, as a practitioner, once you reach an advanced level in your practice, it is your duty to question, verify, and enhance past knowledge and not just blindly accept and conform to it. Otherwise, you will be only limiting your own potential. Of course, it is a martial art, but you should also treat it as the martial science. That ends today's video. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Enjoy your practice.